we have seen Sean McVay roll with the hot hand in the past. So let me just pull some of these names out here that you might have
Do it.
forgotten.
Hit 'em.
CJ Anderson, week
Yuck.
16 through 17 in 2018, averaged 25 touches and 23 points per game, and then poof, vanished into thin air. Malcolm Brown, weeks 1 through 2 in 2020, averaged 17 touches and 15.4 fantasy points per game, poof, vanished into thin air. Cam Akers, week 13 through 17, 23 touches, 14 points per game. Darrell Henderson, weeks 1 through 12 in 2021, 18 touches and 16 points per game. And then Cam Akers again at the end of last season, weeks 13 through 18, averaged 19.3 touches and 17.7 points per game. So I'm throwing a ton of numbers at you, but what I am trying to display is that Sean McVay will prop a running back up with a ton of obscene volume that makes it seem like, wow, we've got a guy. Like, people fell for CJ Anderson. They fell for Malcolm Brown. They fell for Darrell Henderson. We fell for Cam Akers this offseason, and it's a mirage.
We are selling high on these players before week 3. Dave, you're pretty good with the stock market. No, you understand how that works. You buy low, you sell high.
I actually sold all of my Ethereum at $1,400. So maybe you shouldn't be taking financial advice from me.
Yeah, no, you're talking to the guy who bought high on Bitcoin and sold low. So this could be an absolute disaster of an episode, but we're gonna try anyway.
So here we are talking about buy lows. Go out and buy Kyren Williams. Just kidding.
No, you have started this off in such a horrible manner. Let's start off with actually some of the biggest news going on in fantasy football right now. The Browns signed Kareem Hunt. We knew that this would be an option. It's been talked about. It's almost like every time a running back got injured, we're like, they'll pick up Kareem Hunt or Leonard Fournette or Darrell Henderson. It finally happened. Browns have Kareem Hunt joining. Jerome Ford is still projected to be the starter there. Pierre Strong is going to be getting some work. Dave, with the signing of Kareem Hunt, does this mean that we need to be selling Jerome Ford really quick? Like, was this a rental before he even plays a real game?
Well, I think the toughest thing going for Jerome Ford is if you look at his schedule coming up. I mean, he doesn't have an easy game on his schedule really until week 8. Week 3, he's playing Tennessee. Week 4, he's playing Baltimore. He's got a bye week 5. Week 6 against San Francisco. Week 7 against Indianapolis. So if you dumped a bunch of fab on Jerome Ford, you might be looking at a tough 5-6 week stretch here before he really becomes fantasy relevant. Now, I ate a lot of crow because the night that Nick Chubb got injured, I said, I don't think the Browns are going to trade for Kareem Hunt. They essentially benched him last year when they were paying him like millions and millions of dollars. He could not get on the field. We know, looking at the efficiency metrics, that Kareem Hunt is not the same guy that he was his rookie season in Kansas City. As a matter of fact, he was terrible last year. I mean, one of the least efficient runners in the NFL. So I kept hearing this narrative that, like, oh, well, they're going to bring him back because he knows the offense. But we regularly see running backs show up, get like 1 or 2 practices in, and then look great in an offense. It's not like you need to learn the offensive scheme and the tendencies of your quarterback. You grab the ball, you find the hole, and you run upfield. It's kind of easy for a running back. So, like I said, I'm eating crow because I did not expect Kareem Hunt to return to Cleveland. I thought that relationship had soured. I still think Jerome Ford is the guy here, but if Kareem Hunt takes on that passing down work, it does kind of limit the ceiling for Jerome Ford, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that the important thing to look at here, right, is that, one, I don't think we were ever going to have a Jerome Ford getting 70 to 80% of the touches. Like, that was barely even the case when Nick Chubb was the starting running back. So I don't think that was ever happening here with Jerome Ford. But I think the bigger thing here to look at is just try to, we always say like follow the money and all that when we talk about these deals. I would just say the actions speak louder than the words here. The Browns have had a lot of opportunities to put Kareem Hunt at the forefront of this offense. Last year, they really didn't do it. In the offseason, they didn't bring him back. And then when they still needed more running back help, they trade draft capital to go get Pierre Strong, who is a backup on the Patriots. They were willing to say that we would rather have this guy who's a backup elsewhere than re-sign Kareem Hunt, who knows our system and could be able to jump back in. So it took a Nick Chubb season-ending injury for them to be like, all right, fine, Kareem Hunt, you can come back. So does it kind of hurt Jerome Ford a little bit? Sure. I don't think you need to be selling on him. I think if you have him, he's going to be a worthwhile running back to have on your roster. I just don't know how much we're really going to get out of Kareem Hunt this season.
Right. And that's the thing. I don't think Kareem Hunt is going to be fantasy relevant, but he's going to be just enough that it's going to make Jerome Ford probably not worth the 50, 60. I actually saw somebody ran a poll where they said how much fab was spent on Jerome Ford. Over 50% of the responses on there were above 90%. I mean, people were really making it rain on Ford.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, people were really dropping a lot of money yesterday. Well, fake fab money, but either way,
Yeah.
they were trying to get it. And I don't know. I just don't really understand this move from Cleveland. He had been there for years. They knew that he wasn't an efficient running back, but Nick Chubb goes down, and desperation is a stinky cologne.
Cologne's not stinky. That's not how that works.
I mean, it's a saying. I thought it was perfume. I actually had to look it up because I wanted to use it on the show today, and I wanted to make sure I got it right. Desperation is a stinky, stinky cologne.
All right, so if you're enjoying all of our talk about cologne and perfume and the Browns running back situation, please give this video a like. Make sure you're liking the video. Subscribe to the channel because we're bringing you this show 4 days a week. We go for a 5th day on the audio platform. And then Sunday mornings, we are bringing you a live start sit show where we are able to help you out with your lineup. You can drop your questions in the chat every Sunday morning. Also, drop your comments down below. You've got trade questions. I know you do. We've been getting trade questions on every single one of these videos. Drop those questions in the comments down below, and I will personally get back to every single one of them. I always make time to do that every day. All right, Dave, we are talking about players that we want to sell before week 3. So we're trying to make these trades ASAP. I want to hear who your first trade target to sell is.
So I'm going to start off with a quarterback here. And in a lot of leagues, quarterbacks don't really have a trade market. So this is mostly for your super flex and for your 2 quarterback leagues. But right now, you got to be selling Kirk Cousins. I mean, you feel like you hit gold. You drafted him as the QB, 14 or 15? He was going outside of the top 12 quarterbacks in a lot of drafts this year. And right now, he is the overall quarterback 1. So congratulations. Got yourself some great production through the first 2 weeks. But I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, but it is not going to last. He's attempting 44 pass attempts per game, which would be an NFL record. He's on pace for over 6,000 yards and 51 touchdowns. Now, Kirk Cousins is a very good, competent NFL quarterback, but he is not 2007, 2013 Brady, 2018 Mahomes. Those are the only quarterbacks that have ever eclipsed 50 touchdowns in a season, and I don't think Kirk Cousins is going to be able to do that. The 6,000 yards, that's just absolutely impossible. Only 2 quarterbacks in NFL history have eclipsed even 5,000 yards, and none more than 5,500. So right now, it's just unsustainable what Kirk Cousins is doing. I don't need to spell it out for you. It's just not sustainable. Kirk has played in 2 close games where he racked up a ton of points in garbage time, and that's not going to happen it might happen every single week. This is the Vikings we're talking about, but if anybody's buying Kirk, I am selling. I would prefer all of the obvious quarterbacks, the guys way atop the list, but I would flip Kirk right now for Jared Goff or Joe Burrow coming off the injury, Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones. There's a lot of quarterbacks that I still prefer over the rest of the season over the current QB1.
And you know what? This is interesting. I know you joke that we disagree all the time. I might push back on this a little bit because
it makes for better content. We don't want to just sit here like bobbleheads and say, good take. On to the next one. This is what we got to do, Alfredo.
Well, because, I'm looking at the schedule right now, and I get it. He had some big-time performances against some bad secondaries, but it doesn't appear to get a whole lot harder for him. Next week, he's got the Los Angeles Chargers. Then he's got the Carolina Panthers. Kansas City Chiefs are a little bit better than Chicago Bears. Then you get the nightmare matchup against San Francisco, who, by the way, they were just carved up by Matt Stafford. So Green Bay, Atlanta. Really, I think the toughest matchup might come in Week 10 versus New Orleans. So I don't know that I'm fully on board with him as a sell high, but I do absolutely believe that he's outperforming. He's outperforming the draft capital. And I think that's the sentiment that you're giving here, right? Whether it's a running back or wide receiver that are just being churned out, or it's one of these players at a premium position, quarterback or tight end, or a onesie position. That's what it's called sometimes, who is outperforming. He's the quarterback 1 in fantasy.
Yeah,
there's literally not a higher time.
He's hit his ceiling outcome in both games, and we haven't seen the floor yet. But we talked about this in the offseason, that Kirk Cousins has one of the shakiest floors of any starting quarterback in the NFL. He had multiple games last year where he was given us single-digit fantasy points. He had that week, week 14 or week 15 against Indianapolis last year, where he gave us literally 2 fantasy points. So right now we're riding high. We got Kirk Cousins with the gold chains and the sunglasses. He's feeling himself, but it's only a matter of time before, yellow plaid Kirk Cousins comes out, and then we are not feeling so good about starting Kirk Cousins in our fantasy lineup.
Is yellow plaid the official color of sadness? Is that what you're bringing
There
up
was
here?
that meme going around last year. Remember, he was wearing the shirt, and then they were like, what's with the shirt you're wearing?" And he goes, "I don't know. My wife picks my outfits out for me.
Yes.
She got it from Kohl's."
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's the sad Kirk Cousins. Right now, we got balling on a plane with the gold chains cousin, but it's not going to last.
And honestly, I do agree with you in one sentiment here that obviously you're selling him at his highest peak. There are some scary, valleys there in comparison to the peak that he's at currently. But I also think that there is a real social aspect to this where you got a guy who was the star of the Netflix quarterback
Fair, fair,
documentary. And there's so many people left that documentary saying, I love Kirk Cousins. And I think
right?
that's not talked about often enough. I think as fantasy analysts, we oftentimes have to be as objective as possible, follow the data. There is a psychological aspect to this. It's not just, oh, I love that team, but now people really like this player. So I think I agree with you on that
I
one.
mean, we talk about the Hard Knocks bump every single year. Like
Yep.
as soon as Hard Knocks kicks off, all these guys, nobody would have known who Jason Brownlee was if it weren't for Hard Knocks. Like these guys become stars every single year. You see Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers and Brees Hall and Dalvin Cook, all of their ADPs went up half a round as soon as Hard Knocks aired. So yeah, it's a very, very real thing.
But you know what? I'm actually going to use that as a nice little lead into my first player to sell ASAP, and it's Garrett Wilson. Guy who got the Hard Knocks bump, so much excitement that was there with Aaron Rodgers. And listen, it wasn't just the Hard Knocks bump, it's that he's a very good player. He's a very talented player. Good is an understatement. He is an incredibly talented player, potentially even elite player in the NFL. The problem is his quarterback is Zach Wilson. And right now, I had this concern in the offseason that the Jets didn't have an identity, right? And that was the question with Aaron Rodgers. But now with Aaron Rodgers gone, they still don't seem like they have an identity. They haven't fully converted into a running team. And then their passing work still not that great. Even Brees Hall is coming out and saying, we don't know what our identity is. We have to do a better job of deciding what we are going to be on offense. We are still figuring that out. Robert Saleh can say all the nice things he wants about Zach Wilson improving from one year to the next. Just because he's better than last year does not mean that he is really a starting caliber quarterback in the league. And right now, Garrett Wilson's overperforming. Garrett Wilson is overperforming with Zach Wilson. He's got 2 touchdowns on just 7 receptions, Dave. 2 touchdowns on 7 receptions. I mean, I've got to imagine that's the best touchdown rate in the league right now of guys that are starting as many snaps as Garrett Wilson. And both those touchdowns we saw, they were incredible plays, right? The first one where he taps the ball to himself. Second one is just a slant that he takes to the house and beats the safety. He's doing 99% of the work on these touchdowns. And after all of that, after these impressive, incredible plays, he's still just the wide receiver 22 in fantasy. I know that off camera, we've talked about how you've said like last time that Garrett Wilson was with Zach Wilson. He was essentially your words, and I'm sorry to do this to you, waiver wire fodder, which is the kind of the truth, man. If we're stuck like this, and this is best case scenario, wide receiver 22, we might get a few of those wide receiver 4 and wide receiver 5 weeks coming in the future. So I am trying to sell Garrett Wilson ASAP. There's going to be some people that still have the Hard Knocks bump in mind. There's still going to be some people that have the draft values in mind. The more weeks that go on, the further our minds get away from this initial draft value where we were looking at Garrett Wilson as a top 10 wide receiver and his performance, 2 touchdowns in a row. That's going to hold hope in some people's minds that he can still do this. Garrett Wilson is so good. He can overcome anything. That may be true, but I'd rather sell as high as I can right now on Garrett Wilson.
So let me throw a guy out there who I think is in a very similar situation. A year
Throw
2
him.
wide receiver who's very talented with bad quarterback on a run first team that doesn't have a lot of volume. Drake London. I feel like they're kind of 2 guys that are cut from the same cloth right now, like wildly talented players, but the floor, we saw Drake London's floor in week 1, which is literally 0. And I think we could see that floor from Garrett Wilson at some point this season. I mean, there just isn't enough volume there to support anything that can be more than a low end wide receiver, too. I mean, he's got the 2 touchdowns, but like you said, came on 7 receptions and coming on just 6.5 targets per game. And I mean, he is pulling over a 30% target share, and that is still coming out to 6.5 targets per game. There just isn't volume here. And Garrett Wilson, unless he can, make these spectacular eye-popping plays every single week, which maybe he can, he's going to have a pretty shaky floor week to week.
So I want to ask you about some players here that you might be able to trade Garrett Wilson for. Some of these might be obvious, but listen, fantasy values change based on the managers and leagues and everything. So let's talk about some of these. I think this one's an obvious one, but Jalen Waddle right now is currently the wide receiver 35. Would you trade Garrett Wilson for him?
In a heartbeat. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
he could pull
yeah.
half the target share and still have more target volume.
Let's take a look at another guy. How about George Pickens, who has had some rocky starts to the
Uh,
season?
I think that's one where I might prefer Garrett Wilson ahead of George
Really?
Pickens, but very, very similar. Yeah, I worry too because that is also a team that doesn't have a lot of pass volume, and George Pickens struggles to pull the volume as well. So you're looking at him, the only way he's putting up meaningful fantasy points any week is if he can have a huge touchdown. Similar to Garrett Wilson, I just think Garrett Wilson's the better talent.
Now, there's one that I really like here. I'm not sure if you can actually get him because he's been good week to week, but I think there might be some name value over some uncertainty here where I think you could trade Garrett Wilson for Jordan Addison of the Minnesota Vikings. And I think Addison has had a decent start here to the year, 16 points in back to back weeks.
And he's
I
only going to
think
get better.
that's the thing is, yes, he's got, that touchdown cologne, but I think the usage is going to continue to get better and better and better. We see that with rookie wide receivers all the time. But yeah, I'm really willing to get rid of Garrett Wilson as fast as possible. Nico Collins, Dave? Nico Collins for Garrett Wilson?
I think I'm going to take Nico Collins. I
Yeah.
joke around all the time that I only care about PFF stats and grades when they confirm my priors. So let me go
Uh-huh.
ahead and throw this one out there right now. Nico Collins has the fourth best receiving grade on PFF right now. Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, and Nico Collins at
Mm.
number 4. I mean, we're finally seeing it all come together here.
Last one I want to ask you about Marquise Brown or Garrett Wilson.
Ah, Marquise Brown has still been pulling volume. There's a lot to be had there, and I still think that we see that bump when Kyler returns. So, it looks like Marquise Brown's situation is almost assured to get better within the next few weeks. There's no guarantee that the Jets change their quarterback. So I think I'd take Marquise Brown ahead of Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, Marquise
And I'm
Brown
sure
right
we
now.
just lost a bunch of followers with me, or a bunch of viewers with me saying that, but give me Marquise Brown.
Well, I think what you have to do is when you make these trades, you have to think about the long term. It's not necessarily short term. You're talking about where Kyler Murray could be back week 5, week 6, week 7. And we know that the trajectory of Marquise Brown will change once Kyler Murray's back, and the trajectory of that offense will change. It's not going to be the James Conner show anymore. So I think that's an interesting one. I like that we laid out some targets to acquire when selling Garrett Wilson here. Let's get to your next guy. And this is a running back that has been the talk of the town in fantasy football over the last week. You are trying to sell Kyren Williams.
Yeah, and I mean, you're going to notice a theme with the guys that I'm talking about on this show. I am taking the very obvious guys. Kirk Cousins, the current quarterback one. Kyren Williams is the current RB2. And the next guy I'm going to talk about is another guy who is way up there right now. I just think that if you aren't trying to sell high on guys who are vastly outperforming what they should be doing, why even hold on to them? Because we know it's only a matter of time before regression hits and they're going to come tumbling back down. We could talk about Kyren Williams a lot. I don't think that he is that good of a football player, and he surely isn't going to continue averaging 10 targets per game, like he did last week. Sure, he's got that role where he profiles to catch a lot of passes, but 10 targets per game over the course of a season for a running back, nobody's doing that. Prime LaDainian Tomlinson, prime Christian McCaffrey, got Kareem Hunt on my mind, prime Austin Eckler. None of those guys are pulling that sort of target share. Kyren Williams was a pretty unathletic prospect. Like, you look at his player profiler, and he's just like bottom 10% in like every single measurable. He's 5'9", 194 pounds, ran a 4.65. He averaged just 4.9 yards per carry in college. Like, there's nothing about him that really excites me. And like I said, he's got the pass catching upside, and we've seen that so far. But right now, Stafford is on pace for 791 pass attempts, which would shatter Brady's old record. There's a few quarterbacks right now that are just passing at an obscene rate, and we expect that to come back down. In addition to the pass rate, which will eventually come back down to earth, Cooper Kupp is going to return at some point, and he's just going to immediately absorb 30+% of those available targets. Last week, Kyren Williams had his big breakout, and most of that came through the air. But on the ground, his rushing yards over expectation per attempt ranked dead last in week 2 among all running backs. So I think that, if things break right, he could be, a weekly RB2 for the rest of the season because he does have this pass catching upside, but I'm hesitant to even expect him to maintain that sort of output. we have seen Sean McVay roll with the hot hand in the past. So let me just pull some of these names out here that you might have
Do it.
forgotten.
Hit
CJ
'em.
Anderson, week
Yeah.
16 through 17 in 2018, averaged 25 touches and 23 points per game, and then poof, vanished into thin air. Malcolm Brown, weeks 1 through 2 in 2020, averaged 17 touches and 15.4 fantasy points per game, poof, vanished into thin air. Cam Akers, week 13 through 17, 23 touches, 14 points per game. Darrell Henderson, weeks 1 through 12 in 2021, 18 touches and 16 points per game. And then Cam Akers again at the end of last season, weeks 13 through 18, average 19.3 touches and 17.7 points per game. So I'm throwing a ton of numbers at you, but what I am trying to display is that Sean McVay will prop a running back up with a ton of obscene volume that makes it seem like, wow, we've got a guy. Like, people fell for CJ Anderson. They fell for Malcolm Brown. They fell for Darrell Henderson. We fell for Cam Akers this offseason. And it's a mirage. I don't want to trust Sean McVay. When it comes to untrustworthy coaches, Sean McVay is up there with Arthur Smith, Bill Belichick, and the worst of them. I mean, throw Pete Carroll up there and just give us a Mount Rushmore of untrustworthy head coaches. I don't want to buy into a Sean McVay running back, and I'm trying to sell Kyren Williams where I can.
I just like the fact that you just kept saying poof right after each guy. You finished
I'm a
off here.
magician.
So let's take a look at this. So, right, if you're trying to sell Kyren Williams, I want to look at some potential candidates that you could trade for. So, Kyren Williams, this one might be a bit obvious, but you got to remember there are going to be a
Yeah,
lot
I
of different
prefer
ways people are
Christian
looking at
McCaffrey.
this. Yep, you nailed it. So I mean, the thing is, Kyren Williams is coming up as the running back too right now. So there are people that might think like, the old Todd Gurley days. I remember when he was getting this kind of usage, or Cam Akers was really good last season. So let's take a look at this: Kyren Williams or James Cook in the Bills offense.
You know, somebody asked me that yesterday on Twitter, and I said I'm probably going to get some pushback for this, but I'd prefer James Cook. He's on pace for almost 2,000 scrimmage yards. He has the draft capital. They like him, so give me James Cook.
Yeah, I have no pushback right here. I'm going James Cook as well. Let's take a look at another guy here. How about this one? Kyren Williams or Joe Mixon? Oh, come on.
That's a tough one because I could have just as easily put Joe Mixon as a sell high. I'm not a big fan of Joe Mixon. We've seen his efficiency dwindle. But I mean, right now, I think you got to be buying low on the entire Cincinnati Bengals offense in hopes that Joe Burrow can resuscitate this team when he comes back healthy. So I'll take Joe Mixon over Kyren Williams.
And this one I kind of love: Kyren Williams or Jahmyr Gibbs.
Gibbs, easily.
Yeah.
I still think Gibbs is top 10 upside down the stretch, so give me Gibbs.
Yeah, I think you're going to run into a lot of people that are going to be disappointed after these first couple weeks. Joe Mixon, 10 points and 13 points. He's averaging just 11.9 PPR points per game this season. And right now, that Bengals offense, he's getting the volume. Like, he's getting what you need. It's that whole Bengals offense just hasn't been good. They have 2 touchdowns in 2 weeks over the course of the season. So I think all of that stuff is going to course correct. And then, man, we talk about Jahmyr Gibbs. I think there are so many people out there that are disappointed. A lot of people that looked at the rankings and says, oh, Jahmyr Gibbs, this is a high ranking running back. I got to go get him. And we haven't quite seen the usage that we want to see yet, but we see the talent, right? And I think that, like you said, as the season goes on, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a lot more valuable. So yeah, I'm trading Kyren Williams for all three of those guys.
I've got Kyren Williams in a few leagues, and I am sending offers out for Jahmyr Gibbs as soon as we are done with the show.
Kyren Williams or Breece Hall? Go.
Come on. Let's move on to the next guy. You know how I'm answering this. Breece Hall, easily. Come on.
I just wanted to see. All right. I'm going to give you our next guy here that I am selling high. Mike Evans, wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And a lot of this, listen, Mike Evans is an incredible athlete. And I know that oftentimes we talk about the age cliff and all that. He's not hitting it. Like, he did not fall over this age cliff. Not yet, man. And it's pretty evident when you're watching the games. Now, the thing here is Mike Evans went up against Minnesota and Chicago to start the season. Very easy schedule. And I think that you're going to see the theme here, right? Of when you're selling players that are ranking really highly in fantasy football right now, you got to take a look at the context of who they played. Mike Evans right now is the wide receiver 4 in fantasy football. Even with Tom Brady, Mike Evans was not finishing as the wide receiver 4 in fantasy football. So the simple logic here becomes, if Baker Mayfield is not going to be able to sustain the offense like this against better defensive opponents and keep Mike Evans as a top 5 fantasy wide receiver, you should be looking to sell him now. We're also talking about Mike Evans, who got back-to-back touchdowns in 2 weeks, a monster 70-yard catch. These are things that I'm not saying he can't do. He will do them. He has these boom games. But I think that fantasy managers could get very disappointed very soon if he starts to have some of these bust games. This is not an indictment on Mike Evans. He's a phenomenal player, and I think he very well could remain as a top 20 wide receiver. I think that's very much within the realm of possibility here, especially with the hot start that he's had. Where my worry comes is Baker Mayfield. And you're going to have some of those weeks where Mike Evans might actually lose you your week because he's attached to Baker Mayfield. There's a lot that could happen with this Bucs offense. I know, Dave, you still see them, or maybe I don't know, that might have changed, but I know that you saw them as like, hey, this could be the Seahawks of this year. I am not there. I am not there. I know they had these 2 good performances against pretty rough defenses, but Baker Mayfield, I think we've seen enough of his career to know he's not it. Listen, I'm yes, don't shake your head at me.
I disagree with you, Alfredo. I think that Baker Mayfield very much so could be it in the right system, and I think he's in the right system right now. He's looked great the last couple of weeks, and he looked great last year in Los Angeles. I think that the Cleveland Browns, I mean, he looked very good last year in Los Angeles.
Very good, okay.
I don't want to get all mystical here and start talking about things that don't exist, but I am starting to believe that the Browns and the Bears might actually just be cursed. I mean, what they do to every single quarterback that comes through either of those franchises, as soon as Baker Mayfield got out of Cleveland, he started looking like a better quarterback than he ever did in Cleveland. So I'm willing to give him a chance this year. I'm on the Baker hype train.
No, come on, man. Baker in Carolina did not look better than he had ever been.
Carolina was bad, but that was a pretty rough roster to be on. But when he was in a good, strong roster in Los Angeles, he looked good. Now he's got a good, strong roster in Tampa, and he looks good this year.
I don't know, man. I think there's a little bit of rose-colored Jay Cutler glasses that you're looking at him here, where they had 2 wins with Baker Mayfield at quarterback for the Rams. One was that super improbable 17-16 win where he learned the playbook on the plane.
Prime time. Yep.
Yeah. And then the other one was a ridiculous 51-14 win over the Denver Broncos, who had literally just exploded. And even in that one, 51 points scored, Baker 230 yards for 2 touchdowns, 17
that was
fantasy
the Cam
points.
Akers show. That game was the Cam Akers show.
I know, but I'm saying it is a stretch to say that Baker was very good last year on the Rams. He was okay. I think this might be some of the best football of his career that he's playing. And that's what worries me. I don't think he's going to sustain that throughout the year. And do you believe Mike Evans is going to remain a top 12 wide receiver for the rest of the season?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. We just got off topic and started talking about Baker, and
no, that's fine. But it's attached.
But I do believe that Mike Evans is a sell high because he has just been putting up insane numbers, and I still think that he's a possible trade target. They talked about him being one of the most likely to move before the trade deadline, and he's probably not going to land in a place where he's pulling the same target share that he is in Tampa Bay. So if he ends up on one of these contenders, Buffalo or something like that, then he's playing second fiddle to a guy like Stephon Diggs. So yeah, I am in agreement with you that I'm selling high on Mike Evans. Just don't throw strays at my boy Baker Mayfield, okay?
Yeah. Oh, okay, sure. That doesn't worry me at all. All right, Dave. Let's get to your third and final trade target to sell here before week 3.
So again, I started the show talking about a quarterback, and now I'm going to talk about a tight end. And there isn't a lot of standalone value for these types of guys in trade markets.
That's tough. That's tough to trade a tight end because there's not a lot of good ones.
Right. So I think what you do with Kirk Cousins and what you do with Hunter Henry is you try to package these guys to another team to move up a tier at running back or wide receiver. So nobody is going to be silly enough to just say, hey, give me your Hunter Henry and I'll give you Darren Waller. That's not how the trade market works. But what you can do is move up in a running back tier and, just totally off the top of my head here, but you take the RB20, move up to the RB15, and you throw Hunter Henry in to sweeten the deal. So I think that's what you can do right now with a guy like Hunter Henry. And don't get me wrong, he's looked great. He was my start of the week last week. I've got him in a ton of leagues, really happy to see it. But if you're not trying to cash in on the overall fantasy tight end 2, what are you doing? Same thing. Like if you're not trying to cash in on Kirk Cousins right now as the QB1, what are you doing? Hunter Henry's on pace for 17 touchdowns, and he's not going to maintain that over the course of the year. He's averaging just 6.5 targets per game. Now, 6.5 targets per game for a tight end is pretty good, but right now, Mac Jones is attempting more passes per game than any quarterback in the NFL. It's just not sustainable. I mean, again, I talked about this with Kirk Cousins, talked about it with Kyren Williams, talking about it with Hunter Henry. It is not sustainable. We have 2 games worth of data here, and when you start to blow that up over a full season, it's really easy to see what's going to stick and what's not going to stick. Hunter Henry, for as good as he's been and as good as the production has been, he's only pulling a 13.5% target share. When that volume drops, Hunter Henry's production is going to drop. So some guys I'd prefer straight up if there's any ability to buy low on Evan Ingram, Darren Waller, Sam Laporta. Throw the offer out and see what happens. Maybe you can get lucky, but like I said, I think the best thing to do is try to add Hunter Henry into a trade where you can tier up at running back or wide receiver.
I'll say this. I think most fantasy managers are going to be too scared to trade away a guy who's giving them starting tight end numbers. But I agree with you. This is the right move. It's tough to see how Hunter Henry is going to continue this level of efficiency, right? I like your exercise here of saying that he's the sweetener to upgrade maybe your running back position. Let's talk about this
And,
then.
and
I
here's what
want
I
to
do. So
actually,
what I'll say, even
yeah,
if you don't have a tight end too, I'd be okay dropping or not dropping, but trading Hunter Henry as that sweetener to move up a tier and then just stream. Pick up some of the guys that we've talked about. If Kincaid or
yeah.
Laporta are still available, probably not after this week's waivers, but you can go out and get Zach Ertz. I think that Zach Ertz is a guy for the rest of the season that I'd probably prefer ahead of Hunter Henry. So if you can throw Hunter Henry in as that sweetener and then pick up Zach Ertz, I don't think you're losing a ton at the tight end position and you could tier up at another spot.
So I think that something interesting here, like two guys that you're talking about selling, it might sound crazy, but I wonder if it works. Do you think that someone is willing to be able to do a Kyren Williams and Hunter Henry for like a Travis Etienne, who was a bit disappointing in week 2?
That would be a dream. Like if I can pull that off right now, if I could sell high on both of these guys and bring in a bona fide RB1, I am that's exactly the type of moves that you should be trying to make right now at this point in the season.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those guys, ETN specifically, who I'm looking here, 6 points last week. And I think that what we're still seeing is the peripherals, the outside stuff, is that he's getting the usage. Tank Bigsby has been part of it, but a lot of that came in week 1 and week 2. There wasn't a whole lot of Tank Bigsby. So I think that's an interesting guy. If you're talking about using Hunter Henry as a sweetener to upgrade a very important position in fantasy football, like running back, I like that one. I like it a
I,
lot.
I think at this point in the season, like, yeah, we obviously want to pay attention to what we've seen through the first 2 weeks, but I still think that we should be weighing our preseason evaluation more heavily than what we're weighing through 2 weeks of football. We obviously have to take this into account because real football is happening and things have changed and everything we thought that we knew is proving to be different. But after week 1, people were panicking about T. Higgins, and then he comes out the very next week and does what T. Higgins does and pulls 9 targets and 2 touchdowns and gives us 27 points or whatever it was. So we still have to hold on to our preseason priors. You don't want to clutch them so tightly that you are tanking your team into week 8 and week 9, but you have to put a little bit of faith into the preseason evaluation at this point.
I'm going to get to my last trade target to sell here before week 3. And it's Raheem Mostert, running back for the Miami Dolphins. And I know that on our last episode, I was saying you've got to buy the hype on the Miami Dolphins offense, and you should for the offense as a whole, specifically that passing offense. However, Raheem Mostert, he has been way overperforming, very similar to Kyren Williams. Right now, he's the running back 5 in fantasy football, 3 touchdowns in 2 games. I don't need to do a bunch of advanced analytics or break out any spreadsheets to tell you like that's probably not going to continue. This is also a guy, Raheem Mostert, that we rarely see him play 10, 11 games in a season. And listen, this is no shade towards Raheem Mostert. I know it may sound like that. He's performing excellent. He's looking like a very good running back, a very good football player. But in fantasy football, we have to think of long-term likelihoods, right? It's great to ride the hot hand. We've never seen Raheem Mostert finish the season as a top 5 running back. This has to be, or at least believed to be, the highest fantasy value that he will have. In week 4, or excuse me, after week 4, we're going to have Jeff Wilson coming back off IR. Devon A-Chain started to get looks this last game. I think this Dolphins offense is going to want to try to keep all of their running backs fresh, keep defenses guessing, and they're going to continue to add more wrinkles as the year goes on. That's what Mike McDaniel does. So this is not going to be a Raheem Mostert only backfield. I really want to sell Raheem Mostert as fast as I can, Dave.
Yeah, completely with you. I mean, Mike McDaniel is the Midas of fantasy running backs. Every running back he touches turns to gold. You can go back to his days in ATL when he was the running back coach there, and it was Devonta Freeman lighting it up. And then he went to San Francisco, and it was Matt Breida and Carlos Hyde and Raheem Mostert and Tevin Coleman and Elijah Mitchell. It didn't matter. Whoever was the guy there was putting up insane fantasy production, and right now it happens to be Raheem Mostert. Next week, 2 weeks from now, it could be Devon Achane, and then it could be Selvin Ahmed, then it could be Jeff Wilson Jr. That pendulum swings quickly in Mike McDaniel's offense, so completely with you. I think that Raheem Mostert is absolutely a guy that you should be trying to sell high on right now.
So I'm going to use some of the names that you love, and I know because I think I might know the answer, but I want to see like how far this stretches. So, well, let's go interpositional here. Raheem Mostert for Zay Flowers.
Yeah, give me Zay Flowers easily.
All right. Okay. Let's go to this is going to be interesting. Raheem Mostert or Amari Cooper?
Amari Cooper. It's
Raheem
I will say I am much lower on Raheem Mostert for the rest of the season. Week 1, Devon Achane was injured. We already saw Devon Achane start to cut into that workload. We got Jeff Wilson Jr. coming back at some point. You're gonna have to really get down the list of rankings until I start favoring Raheem Mostert.
Oh, okay. Well, let's go. Challenge accepted. All right. Ooh, here's a good one because I know you like him, but right now he has not been playing well. Raheem Mostert or Jahan Dotson?
Ooh, I think I'm going Dotson here.
All right. 14 fantasy points in the season for Jahan Dotson, wide receiver 67 at the moment.
For now.
For now. Okay, let's keep going low. Raheem Mostert or Jackson Smith-Njigba?
I think I'm going JSN here.
Okay, I was surprised. I thought that was going to be your line. All right, so I think we get the point here. I think the audience gets the point.
If I can flip Raheem Mostert for wide receiver 3, I'm doing it, is basically what I'm saying. I don't expect this to last. I mean, you might get another week or two of production, and that could be the thing, too. Like, if you're thin at running back, if you are a zero running back guy, and you're already flush at wide receiver talent, quarterback talent, and tight end talent, yeah, ride the hot hand and keep Raheem Mostert. He might be more valuable on your team than he will be elsewhere. But if you've got a lot of running back talent and you need help elsewhere, I think Raheem Mostert makes a ton of sense to flip him for wide receiver 3, a back end tight end 1, something like that.
All right, well, there you have it. Those are our 6 players to sell ASAP before week 3. We're going to be back tomorrow with special guest Jordan McNamara to give you our week 3 starts of the week. I'm not going to pat myself on the back, but I'm going to pat myself on the back because last week's starts of the week were awesome. Dave, yours were as well. I think we hit on maybe every single one of them except for maybe like one guy, but we
Algier was the only one that we didn't hit. And let me just get on my soapbox for a second. 3 straight plays from the 1 yard line, and 2 of them were play actions to Tyler Algier, where there was a wide open lane where Tyler Algier could have moonwalked into the end zone, and they attempted 3 straight passes from the 1 yard line. I'm reeling. I'm still reeling. It is Wednesday, and I am still getting red in the face over that play calling because I would have had a perfect week of starts if it weren't for Arthur Smith and his dumb face on the Mount Rushmore of untrustworthy head coaches. All right, I'm done.
Arthur Smith and his dumb face.
Seriously, my face just got like 2 shades darker of red. That got me. I'm mad.
All right, we'll be back tomorrow for our week 3 starts of the week. As always, thank you to our production team here, Julia, Dylan, and Jagger. Dave, as always, thank you to you. And thank you to all of you for joining us throughout this episode. We'll see you next time. Adios.